Well, I would say right off the cuff that the CPO's job is not to defend the increases. It is to provide clarity on the process that occurred. And so, thank you for the quote and reminding me of what I said in the public domain. The government, I'm sure, is quite aware that no matter what the CPO says today on the media to educate the public, there will still be some who will share the view that these proposals ought not to be considered. And that's fine. They're well within their right to consider that. The decision to accept such recommendations is vested in our duly elected leaders. That is their decision to make. For those who say now is not the right time, the question is, when is the right time? And who determines when is the right time? I have just shared that if these recommendations were not accepted, that office holders under the purview of the SRC would essentially be frozen for 15 out of the last 18 years. I've just shared that the differential for everybody else below the management structure would have increased potentially, including the 5% on the offer, about 16%. And there are wider implications for that in terms of reviewing salaries in the future. One might even argue, Marlon, that if it was not accepted, perhaps we are looking at a wage freeze going forward because there's nowhere to go. We can't close differentials to the point where the persons below the management structure make the same salary or even higher. That is untenable. So the acceptance of the report does not ignore the economic circumstance, but there are fundamental principles that we have to observe. And so what's interesting is that we have right now happening another job evaluation exercise taking place for the civil service, because the civil service, I mentioned all the other services, has not completed a job evaluation exercise. We have failed to do so in 30 years. This is the third such time we are doing it. There's an expectation in 6 months' time that exercise will be completed. The government committed over $25 million for that exercise. And that is just for the consultant. I'm not even speaking about the cost that I have to pay staff in the CPO's office to manage that project.
Yeah, Dr. Dindyal, we must go to a very short break. We are coming back, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, so welcome back. We are continuing our conversation with the Chief Personnel Officer, Commander Dr. Daryl Dindyal. Dr. Dindyal, again, thank you very much for coming this morning. But Dr. Dindyal, the CPO sits on the SRC. So again, as we look at some of these recommendations made for public office holders, we're seeing thousands and thousands of dollars in remuneration. One of them that has been pointed out is the increase for the Prime Minister and also back pay. And again, when you look at what trade unions have been saying, and they have seen the offer, in some cases the 4%, the 5%, they have seen it as paltry, yeah? And while some unions have accepted the offer, some continue to reject it. When you take all of that into consideration, what's your response?
Thank you, Marlon. Let me just correct a perspective.
Yes.
The CPO is not on the SRC. The CPO is not a member of the Commission.
Is not the Secretary?
The CPO is the Secretariat to the Commission. So the CPO is not a part of the Commission. The CPO supports the Commission. So the Commission has its own identity. It's an entity on its own, and they make their own decisions. So the CPO's role is to provide administrative support to the Commission and sometimes technical advice and reports and so on. The CPO does not sit on the Commission. The CPO has no voice on the Commission because he's not a member of the Commission.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I'll add.
Because I think that there has been the view there that here's what. The CPO is sitting with the SRC and is even contributing to this discussion of a salary increase even for himself or herself.
I could accept that perception. The reality is for the 120th report. And let me go back to what has been bandied about in terms of the percentage increase. You have a reference for the Honorable Prime Minister.
Yes.
I've read in the newspapers and I've seen posts about a 47% increase.
Yes.
And a lot of it is not properly reflective of where that 47% value came from. No one has said to the public that the Prime Minister has lost an allowance, a duty allowance, to the value of about $9,000, which was 15% of his existing salary. That is not there. So they have forgotten to mention that. In other words, that duty allowance, which was 15% of his existing salary in value, was consolidated in the salary. He's receiving that already. So after you have consolidated that, in reality, the Prime Minister is not in receipt of a 47% increase because he was receiving that value before. The Prime Minister would have received about a 27% increase in compensation. And the fact that he lost the allowance, when one considers the total cash compensation that the Prime Minister, the office of the Prime Minister, that position would receive, is 24.5%. But it suits the narrative to speak about 47%. There are positions in the 120th report that received over 100% increase in salaries, Marlon. So to single out the Prime Minister, if I was looking on from abroad, I would have the view that this report only dealt with the Prime Minister and nobody else. The SRC, the positions under the purview of the SRC, there are over 300 positions and over 900 incumbents. It includes members of the judicial service, the legal service, top managers in the public service, members of commissions on boards, and of course, elected and appointed officials. It also includes positions that are independent and don't have a family relation. For example, the Auditor General, the Ombudsman, the Industrial Court. It's a wide number of positions. So the SRC is not concerned about the individual who occupies the office,
yes,
who may occupy it, who occupied it in the past. They're concerned about the job that is under evaluation.
Yeah.
The other thing I would add, madam, because part of the discourse is about performance. Why increase salaries when in some people's view the performance standards are not what they should be? They alone know what those performance standards are. What I would add is that at no point in time did the SRC consider in its contemplation the issues of performance. A job evaluation exercise is really a snapshot in time. It is about evaluating jobs based on relativity to each other and what is in the market. Now, the issue about the compensation and what has been proposed, I could say that these recommendations are extremely conservative. Extremely conservative recommendations. I don't think there's any other level of compensation that could have been less than what has been recommended. In other words, the SRC exercised significant restraint in these recommendations. Why? Because they remain at a percentile in the market that didn't go to 60th or the 75th or the 90th as other state sector entities may treat with. They remain at the lowest possible level that could be considered. So there were very conservative recommendations in the
conservative, Mr. CPO, 59, just over 59,000. This is for the Prime Minister, to just over 87,000. In the case of the opposition leader, over 29,000 to 52,159. The Chief Justice, he currently gets 50,350. The SRC has recommended 60,919. Yeah, and the list goes on and on. Cabinet and non-cabinet members have respective monthly salaries of 41,000 to 33,000. Some people may not see this as conservative, you know.
I accept that. They will never understand that it is conservative. They will never. But let me give some context as well. And I'd like to use the job of the Prime Minister.
Yes.
The job of the Prime Minister, there is no debate that job under the review exercise would have scored the highest in our society. That job scored the highest out of all of the jobs in terms of points, more than 1,000 points than the President. And of course, the President office came in second and then followed by the Leader of the Opposition.
Yes.
The higher judiciary had a different system, and I'm not going to go into that particular process, but the SRC remained true to the integrity of the exercise. The exercise that was conducted revealed that the job of the Prime Minister, which is not debatable, is the job that has the greatest impact on our society. And I indicated the conservative nature of the market rates. There are other options that could have been considered that would have gone well beyond the recommended salaries. There's also something I want to share. the Prime Minister is the leader of the country, the leader of government, the leader of the government, makes decisions that impact every single citizen of our society. And I'm going to use a term that he used that I think that was aptly put. He manages and directs and leads a $60 billion enterprise. Our economy is the largest in the region in the English-speaking Caribbean. The Bajan Prime Minister, just for context, is paid more than our Prime Minister. So when one considers what the market rates were and what has been recommended, I hold the view, in my considered a view, that it is very conservative. One more thing I'd add, Marlon. We have CEOs, chief executive officers and executive directors in the state sector earning $180,000 a month, some earning $200,000 a month with bonuses of 8 months per year. They don't manage the country. They manage one entity. And so to say that the recommendations provided is not, at best, reasonable in the given circumstances, bearing in mind that they were frozen for 9 out of the last 12 years, and if it is not accepted 15 out of the 18 years, I hold the view that what was presented by the consultant, because the consultant made those recommendations, not the CPO, the consultant made those recommendations as fair and reasonable given the market rates that were identified at the least possible level.